I'm almost blind, but I can see my name.
Yeah, I can too.
Just want to make sure.
It's an orange and
A
blue.
lot of response, like,
That's good.
two people. And I'm like, is half my emails not going out?
Where's that grandson? Did he graduated?
Yeah, he's in LA.
Oh, oh, okay.
Graduated all.
4:30 churches in the July. So,
Productions.
I'm one of those that you're not gonna get. I'll show up if I show up. And Joe won't be coming.
Okay.
Almost just what she's on.
I'm sure it's exciting to young people.
It is for you.
Yeah. I get burned out on the traffic. What is this?
I'm far from all of them.
Listen, I think that's got you.
He's got 2 or 3 months of fun here.
I'm sorry.
That's good. Sure, you are. Let him tell you how the
Do you need another one from
Just there.
Get started here. Still remind me, golf club got bang on the desk. That's what I was known for. I didn't like to yell. I don't do that. Anyway, we're glad you're here. Quincy was going to do this tonight, but he's tied up in Huntsville, so they took up the slack for me a couple of weeks ago. I've been traveling and then down the other hallway, but I'm glad to be back in here. But I'll say I won't say I'm not prepared. I'll say I'm not as prepared as I would like to be. But that's the beauty of this class here with the way it's set up. We just get it started, and then you guys can let loose. Anyway, let's have a word of prayer before we start here. Dear Father, we're thankful for this day. Father, we're thankful that we have the opportunity to be here. We're thankful for this lesson that we heard on Sunday, for the one that delivered it, for Jeff. We're thankful for it. We pray that now as we spend this time together tonight discussing it, that we will do so and we'll all benefit from our time together and look at it and be able to go out tomorrow and do the things better than we did today. In Christ's name, amen. Anyway, so I mean, it's a real good lesson, so I don't think it will be too difficult to share some things. You know, I know as I was looking over this afternoon, a lot of things, you know, came into my mind. But as we always do, let's start with the text, and that is Matthew chapter 14, beginning in verse 26. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying, "O you of little faith, why do you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." All right, so the lesson that we heard on Sunday is walking in the spiritual waters of faith, and it's basically we're going to be talking about how the fact that we need to have courage in our decisions, courage in our life when we come into obstacles and things that confront us at times, and we have to be able to stand up for what's right and do the right thing and be the right kind of examples. And I know when I think of courage, you know, I go back to some verses that stick out in my mind. I go back to Deuteronomy when Moses was handing over the authority to Joshua. And if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 31 and verse 6, it says, "Be strong and courageous, do not fear or be in dread of men, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave or forsake you." That was God telling Moses. Then Moses is going to tell Joshua, "Be strong and courageous, for you shall go with his people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers and give them, and you shall put them in possession of it." Then there's a couple others over there, and you get with that one. Then another one I looked at, if we have time, we'll look at it later. Philippians chapter 1, Paul is talking about all the struggles that he's had to face, and how the part where he's talking about he would just as soon go on and leave and be with God, but if he's going to be there, he's going to meet each day with courage and keep going, because for him to be there is for benefit for God's kingdom on earth. That's another example that I looked at. There are others we could find, but we will get to this points on the lesson here and then see if we can get some discussion going there. Anyway, let's summarize the lesson here. It says courage is the mental or mortal strength to venture, persevere, withstand danger, fear, or difficulty. And in this day and age, you don't think, when you get up in the morning, you don't think, that you're going to have to do something courageous every day. But you never know when these things hit you. Some of us might be called on to do something that requires, great feat of courage. But most of the time, the courage is just trying to live the right life, trying to be an example, trying to be different. People to realize you're being different and see it in you. And then at times, though, you've got to open your mouth, and you have the courage to stand up for the things that are right, things that need to be done. All right, we'll hit just some of the high points that Jeff looked at. In a world full of hypocrisy, with so many engulfed and pressed into compromising virtues to obtain material wealth, while many others are pressured into compromising their morals and obligations in order to go along, to get along. Spiritual courage is one of the most important character traits we can have. Why, you ask? Because without courage, you can't practice walking on the spiritual waters of faith consistently. I like this, he said, you can't be consistently honorable, you can't be consistently kind, you can't be consistently fair, consistently just. You can't be consistently loving without courage. You can't consistently stand up for what you believe in without courage. You can't consistently be supportive. You can't consistently have someone's back. You can't even be consistently consistent Without the courage, we all need to walk on the spiritual waters. Why do you think it's so challenging for us to be consistent today, or why would that might be a struggle for us? When you turn on the news, I guess I just look about that. I mean, well, I don't want to get off too much, but it doesn't take long to get depressed to turn on the news and listen to the conversations that are on your TV. You know, you just kind of, you want to turn it off and go back outside because I'm not going to make a political statement here, but you know, you just wonder if either side really is worried about the truth. They're both worried about winning, and it can be kind of discouraging. You know, in the business world, you know, there's pressure to do things, to make more money, bottom line. Turn on your TV programs. It's an attack on the things, the values that we have on most things. So it can be kind of difficult to withstand all of that. And that's kind of what this lesson is going to get at here as we go forward. But it is easy to get discouraged. So we need to be, because when we talk about that word consistent, you talk about you want to be consistent in your actions, you want to be consistent with your behavior. To set a good example. Yes, sir.
When I was just reading this and thinking about just the human side, just in lay terms, people are streakish, and so just trying to be consistent in anything, something's going to fall by the wayside. Eventually, you either get tired or you get distracted, and it's easy to not focus on those things, especially spiritually, I think.
Yeah, and when the storms come, it can throw you off, or when things are going well, you can get your focus, your consistent focus can get over here, over this, because you're making progress, and you can lose sight or lose your direction as far as where you need to be grounded in, what you need to be grounded in. And as we get into some of these questions, I think we'll bring some of that out with some examples and things that we look at. But anyway, let's look at, start in with some of these questions here and see what we think. Now, the first one is, Jeff used an illustration in the sermon in which he asked us to consider 4 questions. So we're going to look at each of these questions and see, and the first one is, can you tell me your name? And it says your church name. This is what we're talking about, your church name. Like when you walk in this building here, you have a name, people know you, you walk in, you greet the people that know you, are familiar with, they know a little bit about you. When you leave here and go out Monday to your place of work, do those 2 names, gel? Do they go together? Maybe you deal with people that are in the church, outside, but a lot of us, we don't. I've had jobs where I do deal with people are Christians, and I've had jobs where, I'm the only one there. Do they know that about me, enough about me? I'm not saying, I take my Bible in and I'm pounding my Bible every day, but do they know that there are certain standards, certain pattern that I'm going to base my life on? Are you consistent at that Monday through Friday rather than just on Sunday when you come to church? All right. So when you think about that, things that we need to be consistent in, I mean, if you're a parent, you realize it's important to be consistent. If your children see you come in, see your Sunday morning name, and then they see you on Tuesday, maybe Tuesday night you're at the ballpark and you're acting like an idiot, you're doing things you shouldn't be doing, yelling at umpires. I saw a video this morning of coaches, a Pee Wee football game, coaches at a throwdown, right? During the halftime with the lineup, when they come out, they're all shaking hands. Next thing you know, all the adults. Anybody else see that video? It was on social media somewhere. That next thing you know, all of the guys are, all the coaches, the adults are just in a throwdown brawl there in the middle of the field, and all the little kids are just don't know what to do. Something's not consistent there. I guarantee you, they probably gave him a speech before the game about sportsmanship and being good role models, that sort of thing. But so yeah, I mean, it's important to be consistent when you're children. It's important. You don't know who, your influence. If you're not, if you're going out, and when somebody sees Daryl, they know he goes over there to Hoover Church of Christ. Maybe I don't realize he's paying attention to what I'm doing. I'm thinking I'm okay. He sees me engaged, or my language or behaviors don't gel with where I am on Sunday morning. Your influence, not only my influence, but I've hurt your influence also too by doing that. If he identifies both of us, with being Christians, you know, he's gonna look and say, well, I know I saw what this fellow over here did. So,
And the thing is that there's always somebody you know somewhere.
that's true.
You may think, but it's very rare that there isn't somebody you know or that knows somebody you know. And, you know, like the extreme example was being in a tourist place in San Francisco and meeting people from the River Chase Church of Christ. But you know how many, the old joke used to be if you went to the grocery store with your hair in rollers and you thought you'd just jump in and out, and sure enough, there was people but yeah, there's either somebody that knows somebody you know. You're not going to pull anything off on anybody very long, so you better be consistent.
I don't have to worry about hair rollers.
I know. That was hard for you, Corey.
And you should always, I mean, it's something that you talk about to young people, you talk about even as your adults and older people, you should be concerned about your influence and your example that you're setting for others. And the last thing you would want to do is be the reason that somebody else, you know, said that I've had enough, I'm not going over to that place. Like we go back to that word, hypocrisy. That's something that I've seen you do. And we all struggle. We all have our weaknesses where we stumble, you know, but it's just, I guess the question that he's got here is important consistency between when we're at church and when we're out. We've talked about that. And the people out there know that about you. You know, if you never told them where you go, would they know that, you know, something that was different about you and how you treated others? Do you love your neighbor? Are you kind, respectful? And that sort of thing, you know. So it's important that we worry about that and worry about our influence. Anything else before I go on to the next question? All right. Well, this is the sub part of that question here. It says, do you know where you are? Are you walking on the spiritual waters, or are you still in the boat or on the shore watching? Now, going back to, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going back to the sermon, you know, saying when he talked about on the boat, the point he made about on the boat would be we're in the boat. You know, if you're on the shore, you haven't come into the church yet, you need to come in. But being on the boat is not enough. You know, we are commanded, you know, to spread the word, to share what we have here. So I guess that's kind of where I'm going. If I'm off base, you know, tell me, because I think that's what I was going back trying to think about the sermon that he gave. And the question here, you know, it's safer. Like when we're in here, it's easy because we're all basically in agreement, like-minded. I can remember many years ago I was going to teach an auditorium class, and you know, that would stress me out greatly. And my 25-year-old daughter was like 9 then. And that was back before you had the iPads and all that stuff. And she had seen me just with piles of books because, like I say, I'm not going to be prepared. And she could tell I was very stressed out about it. It was like a Wednesday night summer series where you had to do it in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. They didn't ask you to sign up. They put your name down on the sheet and said, this is your week, you know, be there. And so I was very upset, you know, and we were sitting there, not upset, but she could just tell I was kind of stressed out about it, a little bit agitated, kind of like I'd get like this. But she just looked at me, she says, I don't know what you got to be so nervous about. All you're going to do is get up and talk about, they already agreed with you on everything you're going to say. And she was right, you know, so I mean, that's kind of why, that's what I'm saying. The point I'm making is it's very easy when we're here because we're going to support each other and we're going to do the things that we need to do. Now, the hard part, you know, is when we're out. You know, if you have a sales job, you know, and you're out on the call, you're out entertaining your customers. You know, I've been there and done that, where, you know, and that's the whole thing is it's a drinking party, you know, and are you going to be able to withstand that? You know, if you're out on a corporate function, you know, and there's just a lot of things going on that are not you. And that was one thing I was blessed, and I had a job where there was a lot of us were Christians, but it was not everything. Then I spent years at JCA where every day was around chapel, and that was a different set of challenges, but it was not nearly as much pressure to be. Basically, you were out of the boat. When you get out of the boat, that's when the test is are you going to be an influence for good, or are you going to conform to what's the world is doing, or what the world says to do? Any thoughts on that? I feel like I'm talking too much tonight, you know.
You know, I'm happy to hear you say that you went through that, because I was in sales too. And one of the things that I struggled with, especially early on in my Christian walk, was being authentic and being the same person. If you ran across me on a Tuesday, it would be the same person that was in here on Sundays and Wednesdays. And what I started realizing was that oftentimes I would wake up, and depending on what was going down, if I had a ton on my schedule, whatever, I'd be less than, let's say, less than cordial, less than friendly to the members of my household. But then when I got in my car and I went to my first accounts and I'm dealing with people, I would be like, oh, hey, you know, I call myself Corporate Corey, you know, hey, hi, oh, you know, and it just dawned on me that, you know, as a Christian, we're called on to be the same and be approachable and put others before us. But what I had become was I was treating people outside of my home better than the ones inside my home. And so I eventually got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't care what anybody else says. I'm going to turn this around. Because the way I see it, I'm not looking for somebody to play with me at recess, because I'm already married with children. You know, so I'm going to definitely turn around and be the same, you know, and not have to put on my church face as I come through the door, you know, because people are watching. And I think in this day and age when there's so many choices and people don't like to read, people tend to learn about Christianity through watching others rather than reading the Word and finding out who God is and why we believe in what we believe. It's important for us to be authentic and to be that person that knows where they are and knows who they are at all times.
Corey, was it Leah that convinced you to change, or did you do it all by yourself?
No. It's a couple of things. It was my children as well. It was a couple of things. I mean, it was kind of embarrassing because, you know, I'm doing all this stuff outside of the home to provide for inside the home, but my whole perspective was backwards, and so it was a combination of things. And I think the Lord spoke to my heart, and I really just had to make a change, and I'm glad that I did.
I will give one little caveat. He is not a morning person, so that did not help.
I'm trying.
All right, and I was saying, and a lot of times it's hard to make that step, but when you make that step, people will respect it. I mean, I'll go one more story about the sales. We had a corporate golf tournament. You know, when you think corporate golf tournament, there's beer, there's also, the president of the company was the elder of the church. We went to church. They come from all over the country, but they knew there was going to be no alcohol. Now, we didn't tell them they couldn't go in and buy some if they wanted to. You know, we didn't go that far. But it just was not going to be provided for them, which, if you've been to any of those kind of things, you know, that's very rare. And but people, rather than get upset or, you know, talk, you know, backwards or make poke fun, the result was more of a respect thing. They respected that was done, and they went on with it. I'd say the influence was much better there. All right, but enough about that. Okay, let's go. So, is it safer in the boat or on the shore? See, and that's what we're talking about, the boat being the church. I'm not going to answer that. Somebody else answer that. I was fixing to answer that, but somebody else needs to answer that. Safer in the boat or on the shore?
In the boat.
In the boat. That's right. We've kind of said that because we're here, you know, on the shore, you know, here in the boat, we've got to get people. You know, we're here to back each other up. We're here to help each other. We've got each other's back, supposedly, and take care of each other.
Standing on the shore, though, it probably looks a lot safer there.
Yeah, it looks a lot safer.
I was going to say, it depends on your perspective.
Depends on your perspective, but and we want to get all those people on the shore in the boat with us. We want to get as many people on the boat with us as we can get.
You can't go anywhere. You're standing on the shore.
Right. I think that's good. That's a good way to put it there. All right.
Now, there's a lot of people who are not members of the Church of Christ. But if we set the right influence, if we've got the courage, they really don't want to do some of those things that everybody else is doing either. And they're kind of glad to find out that other people, so we can really, by saying, this is available, but we're not sponsoring it because it's a corporate thing, and so it's just there, whatever. But you know what I'm talking about. There's people out there who think they're supposed to do things because it is a corporate thing or because other people are doing it. And when they see somebody else with the courage, they won't either.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was more positive came out of that than, than if we just banned it and said you can't do it at all or that sort of thing. All right, so we know where we are, spiritual waters of faith. Talk a little bit about taking risk. If you're walking by the spiritual waters of faith, then it's kind of like the lesson we talked about the last time I was up here. We're walking by faith or by sight. We're willing to take the risk because we know that God's going to be with us and God's going to take care of it. And one of the questions here, I think, is what do the risks look like? If we were going to take a risk, some of the risks we might take. Changing careers, or just talking to someone about your faith. You take a risk, when you parent your children, you make decisions, are you thinking to yourself, are you doing this right? Are we making the right decisions, And sometimes you don't know if you made the right decisions. You don't know till 15 years down the road or something whether you made the right decision. But yes, but go back to the lesson 2 weeks ago, walking by faith and not by sight. We have faith that God's going to take care of us. God's going to be with us. As he told Moses and Joshua, he would not desert them. He would always be with them. And he's told us the same thing. All right, let's see. There's one here. The next question is, do you know why you're here? That's a question we just spend a lot of time on. Do you know why you're here?
Well, probably most of us know why we're here. It's just, are we doing it? We're here to evangelize. We're here to raise our children properly. We're here to follow God's word. We're here to get ourselves and others to heaven. And are we doing it?
Yes, Mark?
Yeah, I got 3 verses that I use for like a little 6-word reminder to me, because when trouble hits, for like Peter's example, he got in the boat, and I'm starting to sink in the ocean. I think what I'm here for is to try to sink or swim, and I forget what I'm really here for. In Isaiah 43:7, God says, "For all that are called by my name, I've made for my glory." So the reason I was created was for the glory of God. Philippians 2:13 says, "For it's God who wills the work, for it is God that works in you, both to will and to work for His good pleasure." God created me for His pleasure. And then Ecclesiastes 12:13, the end of the matter is, you fear God and keep His commandments. So I'm here for His glory, I'm here for His pleasure, and I'm here to do it His way. What that means to me is, I can say that I need to be a father, or I need to be a good member here, or I need to be a good husband or a wife or whatever. But most people that have families love their families, and most people that come to church love their church members. But the real question is, the real challenge for me is, I can say that I love my kids, but the challenge is, do I love them for God's glory and God's pleasure, God's way? See, it's possible for me to love people and not really going all the way God wants it done. Sometimes I love people so they'll love me back. That's kind of a selfish motive. So I challenge everything, because when I get in trouble, I forget it. I start thinking about me too much, and I have to gear myself back and say, you know what? I'm really here for this. This is about God. And everything I do is supposed to be about God, not about her.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
To piggyback off what Murph said, you know, I mean, I think personally, I don't want, maybe y'all think this, or maybe y'all don't want to admit it or whatever, but personally, I mean, we should be scared. I mean, we are scared what's going to happen if we don't go to church. You know, I mean, I was always saying, you have to go to church, you go to hell. And that's just not right, you know, I mean, but that was told to me growing up. And, I mean, we're supposed to do it to glorify, we're supposed to, me as the elders say, but we come to church, or I'll tell my daughter, I think I do it as a dad thing, I tell my daughter now, we gotta go to church so you can grow more as a Christian, you can do this right here, but I think we do it as a, well, we don't want to upset God, or we don't want to upset somebody else if we don't go to church. There's a lot of things we can be doing on Wednesday night, you know, I mean, we're tired halfway through the week, you know, it's hard sometimes to come, you know, my wife says, oh, you know, we have dance on Tuesday nights, so we can't go to church on Wednesday because she's so tired. And that's not an excuse. I mean, I think we make excuses, you know, as to, you know, why we can't or we cannot go to church. I mean, it's hard sometimes. It's like, I'm going to go to church today, you know, to go check my name off that list. You know, sometimes we have to do that, or some people think that. But, I mean, personally, I think, I've always thought it was a guilt thing. Maybe that's not the right thing until we wait.
Respect.
You know.
Respect God. Fear God means respect God. You have that, what you want to do, you're going to want to be assembled, like-minded brethren, whenever you get the chance. And, you know, as you said, we're going to get together on Wednesday nights at 7 o'clock, so we're here. We should be. I mean, you need to be here. Somebody else might need for you to be here. So it's.
I always look at it as a re-energize. You know, I mean, sometimes, I mean, my week's sometimes hard. I mean, where I work is not hard, but sometimes emotionally, you know, a lot of things happen in our lives, you know, that, you know, our car breaks down, or, you know, something, or we got this bill coming up. And so personally, I need a spiritual family. You know, I always call y'all more family than my own family. I like y'all more than I like my own family. You know, and it's because I feel like I get re-energized. Maybe it's because, I don't know, but I love it, you know. Well, I'm not saying I love half y'all.
It says here in my prompts with this question, it said, why did God put us here? What is He wanting to accomplish through our lives? You know, and we're trying to make applications. And when I saw this question, last spring, my wife and I talked down the hall, and we were teaching the story of Mordecai and Esther. I'm sure you're familiar with the story. Esther, Haman had a plot to kill the Jews. Esther had influence. Mordecai was trying to convince Esther to go talk to the king. She was waffling. She didn't want to do it. You know, Mordecai is encouraging her to do this. And this verse, there's one verse that's kind of stuck with me ever since then, because I thought then that would be a good devotional for young people or something like that. But it's Esther chapter 4 and verse 14. And this is Mordecai when he is telling Esther, you know, we got to get out of the boat. We got to do something here. You know, you got to take action here. And he says, verse 14 says, for if you keep silent this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place. And that's because if we keep our mouth closed and we don't, step up, we know how it's going to end. You know, I mean, God's going to win in the end. You know, it might be more comfortable for us to not make a stand. And I said, and going, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So he was basically, trying to get pride, Esther, and sometimes we need a Mordecai behind us, sometimes to prod us along and tell us, who knows, maybe this is why you're here. And I don't know that we'll have an opportunity to save a whole race of people, but, you're here, like you said, maybe you're here to get married, to raise a family, to train them to love God. Maybe you're here for that, you know, and support them and get everybody. Yes, does somebody have something on there?
Yeah, the Bible actually tells us in Ephesians 2:10, for we are his workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we should walk in them. We're here to do good works in the name of Christ Jesus,
Right.
which is in glorifying God.
You know, and that can manifest itself in a lot of ways. Just like we listed off all those things we were talking about a second ago. I mean, you know, and sometimes it can be, you know, just helping your neighbor, doing the right thing. Sometimes it can be something very drastic. Let's see, there's one other verse I have here. Let's see. All right, let's see. My pages are sticking together. Titus chapter 2, 11 through 14. The grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness or worldly passions, to live self-control, upright, and godly lives in the present age, waiting for the blessed hope. So we're leading a self-controlled, upright, godly life. You know, I mean, it can manifest itself in a lot of ways where we can influence others and do what we're supposed to do. If we have to be different from the crowd, if we have to, you know, my words are not coming that I'm trying to say here, but I hope you're getting what I'm meaning here. Anyway, so that's what we need to do. That's why we're here for, you know, and there can be different reasons, you know, and you never know. I mean, sometimes you're here for that day to show a kind word to somebody in the grocery store. Maybe somebody needs a kind help. Maybe you're here for that. As a Christian trying to live the right life, you know, you do that sort of thing. I mean, and you do it because it's right. Yes, sir.
This might be off the subject somewhat. However, courage would be part of the ideology. You know, a lot of times we talk about the good side of life, and we talk about all the many blessings we have. I don't think we talk about Satan enough, because we are tempted and tried every day. My question is, does temptation and trials come from Satan?
This from God. I believe God puts struggles for us. I mean, that would be my thought. I mean, if somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
But I think Satan
Has
is
a
a
play.
roaring lion, and a lot of these discussion points here are great, and they're rhetorical. Like if I go into my boss who is not a Christian, wasn't a Christian, different companies, and he asked me, what are you doing here? And if I said, well, I'm here to convert Christians. Now, this is my employment boss. He's going to look at me and say, well, you're supposed to be here working for me. You're supposed to be here earning income for me. Now, I've got to decide at that point, was he talking, where is he coming from? Why are you here? Why are you here at my job? Is it to convert Christians? Question.
You're here, I guess.
Convert Christians by your example and shining your light.
That wasn't my question, but
As your boss, I guess he could require you not to be actively converting on the time.
that's where Satan comes in.
Yeah.
That's where I'm trying to get to the
Yeah.
point where there's another side of this good Christian life, and it's rhetorical.
And as a Christian, in respect for authority, you may have to honor his wishes on that, but there are other ways that you can
Correct.
achieve your.
I managed to get out of that, by
Yeah.
the way. I mean, I managed to get around
Yeah.
it, but it was Satan coming back and saying, ha, 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 I'm going to make you choose who. I think sometimes we don't understand there's a Satan out there that's tempting us also.
What's the verse that says, you know, God won't allow us to be tempted any more than we can withstand, or
Yeah.
I can't think of what it is. I know it's out there somewhere. I'm reading it.
James says that, let no one say when he is tempted, I am tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anyone. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and enticed. So God does not tempt us. He does test us, because in that same chapter he says, brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. God tests us, but he does not tempt us. And there, I don't know what it is, but you're right. God will not tempt us more than we can withstand.
He allows.
What about Satan? That was my reason.
Satan's a great tempter.
Yeah.
What about Satan?
We just
I
have to
think
know.
when you look at the story, when you look at what happened with Job, I think that Satan is walking around seeking who he might destroy. And just kind of tying Job to Ephesians 6. I mean, we're fighting battles against spiritual things that we have no idea about. And the devil could have had the same talk with God about any one of us. Have you considered my servant, whoever? Fill in the blank. And God does allow us to be tempted. But yes, there are verses that say He won't allow us to be tempted above what we can face. And actually, getting to this lesson, I'm glad I'm in the boat with y'all. Because, it's hard sometimes, as somebody said earlier, it's tough to come on Wednesday night sometimes. Matter of fact, Bing teases me all the time that Wednesday night, I'm not a faithful Wednesday night. I work a lot. And so it's not always easy to come on Wednesday night, but I've never regretted when
Okay, we got just in a couple minutes here. Let's come back to this spiritual courage. What kind of storms does God allow us to, and the purposes for the storms? So we would say God doesn't tempt us. God may allow the storms to come in to our lives, and why?
Because it strengthens us.
Charles just read that one.
Yeah.
It helps us. It strengthens us. Sometimes it may humble us. If we get to thinking that we're doing this on our own, God has a way of bringing us back down.
They're absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
That's why He allows them, because they're necessary.
Well, we grow by facing diversity and learning, and having to choose the right way to go, path to take.
We have storms. And that's the true storms. I guess I've been very blessed with my children. We've enjoyed health. I didn't have too many of those, but just going through health. Losing a child, losing a spouse, parent. When you lose your parents, those are the kinds of storms that, when they come, are the difficult things that test our spiritual courage. And back up there, how do you define spiritual courage?
Trust.
Trust. Anybody else?
It's not necessarily the lack of fear. A person can be fearful and still act courageously.
Oh, yeah.
In some circumstances, you'd be a little foolish not to be scared, like if you're fighting a war, people are shooting at you.
Oh, yeah,
But you
yeah.
can still act
When you step out on faith, you're still, maybe you're a little bit afraid when you're doing it. You're trusting that God's going to.
Your trust in God outweighs the power that fear has over you.
And you can, just like Peter took his eyes off of God and he sank. So it's an ongoing process that we try to do better at. When we face this is the other problem. When we face the difficult, this is a hard thing to do, I imagine. We should ask ourselves, what lesson is God wanting me to learn through this experience? Like I said, I guess the most traumatic, when I lost my dad, that was probably one of the hardest things for me. That's 4 years ago. I was 50 years old, but still, that was one of the hardest things that hit me in dealing with that. And I look back now, and there are some positive things that came out of that. It caused me to, reevaluate where I was, because I looked at where he was and things he did, and that sort of thing. You others may have something similar to that, but, and then I go back.
I think you ask, what did I do wrong? And how do I need to correct that and improve my walk with God? When a tragedy occurs in your own life, because it does humble you and bring you to your knees.
Yeah, it causes you to question everything. And yeah, you go forward and you think, well, what do I need to do, or what can I get? And then I go back with my kids, when coming up with your kids, you go through problems and situations that arise with them, you know, and when you have teenagers and, you know, those of you that have raised teenagers or those that haven't, you know, it's coming. And when they seem like, you know, just a crisis, you know, and you want to get your children through this thing, you know, I mean, when you've been on the other side, you know, you think, what, you know, how are we going to survive this, you know, and you do get through, and you can look back. Usually when you look back, you think of some of the lessons that you learned from that, but we're over time now.
It doesn't when trials and temptations come, it doesn't necessarily mean that we did something wrong. Bad things happen to good people because of sin in this world. A person decides to get drunk and then drive, and then he kills somebody. Well, the person who got killed didn't do anything wrong, but the drunk driver did. So it may not be that we've done something wrong when things come our way. It just may be to wake us up, strengthen our faith, or let us humble us, and like you said a while ago.
Yeah, hopefully you come out the other side stronger for it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John, not being fair.
Thank you. It wasn't obvious. I'm not a very I walked into a little country.
Have a rock. Hey, John.
Just followed y'all, so.